people's attention spans are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So you have to work to figure out what the core message actually is and how to kind of present that to someone in a way that makes sense using as few words as possible. Especially when you're dealing with a lot of younger people. You know the concept of Twitter and Facebook and how you have character limits. A lot of people shut down when they see anything more than 2 sentences and they're like, it's too much work, I have to read it. Blah. So what I did with this, like I said, was print it off and then look at the slides and figure out, you know, what can I take out, what can I make a little bit more exciting. Now, the other thing I wanted to do was look at the supporting imagery that I'd used here. None of this is relevant, none of it. I was looking at it and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? This is awful. Because none of it's relevant to anything that's on the screen. So it is literally just clutter that is just sitting there taking up space. So when I revamped it, what I tried to do is make it tighter and less wordy, and then find images that were actually way more in line with what I was talking about. So the revamped version, we'll go through slide by slide from the beginning and I'll tell you kind of why I did what I did. So the title slide, very boring, there's nothing going on here. So I've taken that and put a graphical element around it and then made the text actually kind of sit in the center and pop a little bit more. That's the same as it is on the other one. So the other one has the introductory video bit after this. I actually took this introduction out entirely. I've found that people don't read these. This is just a slide that most of the time gets completely skipped over because they want to get into what they're actually learning about. They don't want to read what they're going to be reading later. They want to know what it is straight away. So I've actually started kind of removing these or trying to find a different way to present them to people so that it's not so bullet pointy. And there are ways that you can do it. We could discuss at length on any other day. But yeah, so what I did was I actually took the introduction portion and I summarized it. Sorry, I'm jumping around a wee bit. I summarized it here. So that's all the introduction was saying was you're going to be learning about tips for creating effective feedback within Bracken. So I took an entire slide and put it into one sentence. Now, this may or may not work for the content that you're working with. Sometimes you really do need an introduction slide, especially if you're working with older people because they're used to this kind of a format where they have, this is what I'm going to be learning, and then here I'm into the learning. So it's kind of a less jarring effect for them when you lay it out normally, but it depends really on who your target audience is, and that's something that I try to tell people anytime you're working with content is you really need to understand who your end users are because you want to pitch everything to them, whether it's how they engage with it or the level that they're working at. It needs to be comfortable for them. That's why it takes so long. A lot of people think that it's just copy and paste, but it actually takes a long time to do it properly. Right. So introduction slides got condensed and we had the video. So there's the video. And then on this slide, we have you're already on the right track. It's quite wordy. I rewatched all the videos as well. So when you're looking at any YouTube links, you want to check your YouTube links if you've put any of those in, mainly because you don't own them. And if the person who's put that on YouTube decides they want to take it down, then you're a bit out of luck on that front. So always go through and check your links probably once a year, I would say. But what I did with this one was center the video because it's actually quite relevant and it's pretty good. Like he's talking about his experience in a kitchen and how he gives feedback to people. And I thought it was still quite relevant and rather important. So instead of leaving it off to the right, I actually centered it underneath the text. And I completely condensed this down and tried to draw more attention to what the feedback actually was and changed it up a wee bit. So it's just kind of refreshing what you already have and condensing it. If you've ever worked in retail and you've had a shop window, similar concept. If you leave the same things in the shop window all the time, people will stop looking in the shop window. And your core business when you're doing retail are people who are coming in regularly. You want to have that kind of customer drawback. So if you're not changing it up, people are going to get bored with it. This doesn't necessarily count when you've got progressive information and your users are only doing things once. But if you're having them redo something, so if it's like a health and safety certificate on how to use a piece of equipment and they have to do that once a year, this is a really good opportunity for you to go through and make sure that what you're discussing is actually still correct and that it's been jazzed up a wee bit to make it a little bit more exciting for the people who have to do it every year. So that was that one. Now with this one, again, a bullet point that serves no purpose because you're going to be talking about all these things anyway. So I completely ripped that out. And then we jump into this be specific. So this is discussing kind of how you can give more specified feedback to your users. Now, this, again, makes no sense. Why is there a dog on the, who knows? Who knows? So what I've done is taken this and tried to find a graphical element that is a little bit more representative of what the topic actually is. Helps it speak to the user a wee bit more. Right, so we've kind of gone through looking at your content and revamping it. I will tell you when I did this module and redid it, the part that took the longest was actually rereading everything that I'd written and figuring out how to condense it down and make it better. So prepare yourself for that. It's not just going through and swapping images out. It is a lot about, you know, making sure that what you've written is actually, does that make sense? Is it still correct? Is it still current? And then can I make it smaller? It takes a long time. It takes a lot of brain power. So prepare yourself with like coffee and snacks or something. Give yourself a treat at the end of one of them. Positive reinforcement's really good. And what I would like to point out as well is with the imagery, we have access to a stock photo site. And so if you guys are finding that you can't get a photo of something on site that works for what you're trying to talk about, like this is a great example. I don't have a photo of what it looks like to give feedback to someone because it's a very like mental process. So we use a lot of stock photography and stock imagery to kind of suit situations like this. And if you find that you're in a pinch and you've got some stuff that you want imagery for, you can always get in touch with your representatives and they can give you an idea on how we can help you provide some more imagery. We also do work with, what's the name of their company, Reframe Media? Mm-hmm. We do work with a company in Dunedin called Reframe Media to go and shoot videos, collect still shots of different procedural pieces of information. That is incredibly valuable to have. And that's something that you don't necessarily need to hire out. iPhones actually take really good photos now and really good videos. Same thing with Samsung. I'm not brand specific because all the smartphone cameras nowadays are quite good in terms of detail and what you can get out of them. So it is about thinking creatively how you can take the text that you have and bring it to life for your user. So how can I take this and provide an image of something that's going to suit for what I'm trying to write. Everything makes sense on that front so far? Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, okay. The other thing we've started doing recently, so just to talk to you about some trend stuff that's kind of coming through is, and we'll go to this page so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. This page, for example, has a decent amount of text on the top and then an image kind of just underneath it. What we've actually started doing is we've taken the interaction itself and actually put it on the next slide over and placed an image in the background of it or given it some sort of a backdrop so that the user focuses in on that specific question. And that's something you can do to kind of give a little bit more pace to your modules. It keeps people focused on the content that they're reading, but what you can do is ask that question about something that they've already read so they can kind of navigate back through and reread stuff. It's all about repetition and getting people to engage with stuff in multiple ways. This works really well when you're working with a learning module. If you're trying to assess someone, most of the time people end up with, say, 2 or 3 questions on a page, and that's about it. And you kind of work your way through multiple slides. So you've got some different layout options there. But that is something that we're seeing more and more of, and that we've incorporated into a lot of the newer modules that we're putting out. I can probably hunt an example down for that if you want to see what one of those looks like. A couple of other things that I've found that have come up in web design that are actually relatively current for module design as well. Using bold color choices. And when I say using bold color choices, I mean using them responsibly. Don't go crazy, but it is really nice to just chuck in something that's quite bright. You want to be really careful with the type of color that you're picking and that it's not too harsh on the eye, but you can create a lot of dynamic type information when you're using some bolder colors in to kind of create a little bit of excitement around something. So we'll use like color blocks and fill an entire slide with a color and then place the text on top of it for something that needs to be highlighted as an important thing. So if it's a make sure you don't put your hand in the meat slicer or something like that would go on red and with the white text. Just find ways to shake it up, because we do talk about keeping the layout really consistent, and that's still really important when you've got to go through a lot of information. But if you're dealing with a relatively short module, you can actually mix it up quite a bit. Your layout can be different, because you're not asking people to engage with this for 3 hours. You just want them to look at it for 5 minutes. Micro-learning is a trend that keeps popping up over and over and over again, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. And it is not about taking what you have and just slicing it into smaller pieces. It's about taking what you have and actually condensing it and rewriting it. So it's a little bit more in depth, but what you end up with is a way more engaging type of layout for your learner, because they can do one module that's, say, 5 slides long on a part of a process, and they can continue that trend and really feel like they've accomplished something. We can do a lot with the pathways that we build to give them kind of a success icon every time they've passed one of those little tiny modules. And that kind of helps you figure out how much more work you have to do for this, but gives you a little bit of a feel-good factor, because you see how much you've actually done as well. The other thing, a lot of people are bringing in kind of animation to make things a little bit more sparkly. That's it's good if it's really tastefully done. You have to be really careful with how you approach it, because it can be distracting. The recommendation I would have there is look at getting it done professionally if you're going to do it, and if you're not going to do it professionally, replace it with a video and get a real life example of what you're trying to show. I think the animations probably are in the same realm with the images that I've used here. When you've got something that you actually can't get a video of, or that it's a little bit difficult to kind of set up, that's when you would fall back and do an animation of some sort. I don't know that we have a company that we can suggest for it, but we could probably find one in our pile of network goodness. So if anyone's interested in that, get in touch and we can see what we can hunt down. Right, that's kind of my spiel on refreshing your content. Does anyone have any questions about any of that before I move on to features that are up and coming? Slash out. Good. Yeah? Everyone happy? Cool. Okay. What we're going to discuss are 3 new features that have been released in the last little while. Murray, I hope you don't mind we're using PGA as an example.
No, that's all good.
I didn't really check. But your site's quite cool, so I think you'll be all right.
Thank you.
So what we're going to talk about today are lesson certificates, invitations, and recommended modules. Lesson certificates are probably the newest of the 3, and what they are all about, I'll show you on OCS, for example. So OCS is a client of ours who wanted to include lesson certificates for competency, essentially. So they're focused on health and safety. And we developed this concept of lesson certificates in a way to replace the pathway certificates that we had been using, because they're a little bit more locked down. So they're attached to an individual module, and you can set an expiry date on them, which is really handy for a lot of the competency stuff we've been doing. And essentially, they're just a way to keep track of when you finish that module and when it's due to be when it's due to be reset. So the way that this works is when you're creating it, you can have a PDF that's your certificate, and it needs to be set up as a specific type of PDF. We can pull a couple of bits of information from that user when they finish it. So to get it to read on the actual PDF, we can pull their first and last name from their account, the name of the module, the name of the facilitator for that zone, as well as the date they've accomplished it and the date that it's expiring. So we can't add anything else in. We can't put in pathway names or like your favorite color. It has to be in that realm of information. But essentially what you get is when the user finishes the module, I'll show you here, you can see this in 2 places. So as a tutor, as a facilitator for that zone, you can actually look through and see which of your users have achieved certificate status, and then you can actually open their certificate in a new window. So you can see here what's been generated. So his name, when he did it, and then the name of the course. They don't have an expiry date on this particular version, so it's not included. but that's quite handy as a tutor. And then the other area that this shows up in is for the user in their profile. I don't know if the admin account will have anything attached to it though. Yes. So for their user, it'll show up on their profile page, and they can always come back and access this. So as they build up their certificate list, it'll just kind of pile up here, and you can go back and access any of them at any point in time. The nice thing about this is a snapshot in time. So this information stays as it was collected. And if that module is for any reason removed from the pathway, if the pathway removed, it doesn't matter, because this is saved to the user's account specifically. So this is a really nice way to kind of make a more personalized approach to some of the learning that you're providing to people. We can give you heaps of advice on different ways that you can lay out these PDFs as well. A lot of people want to include like a congratulations letter if they're finishing a course, and that's something that we can include at the very beginning and then have the certificate generate on the second page. So that's an option if you've got coursework that you really want to say, hey, thanks, you've done a great job, good work, keep it up. Excuse me. Any questions about lesson certificates? No? Okay. Next on the list are zone invitations. And zone invitations currently are only for users who are not registered on the site yet. They're only for new users, not for current users, to get them into a zone. So if you are setting up a level 1 course and you want to bring a bunch of users in, this is a great way to do it. It is accessed from the user administration of that specific zone. So say, for example, we wanted to add people into this induction area, which is where we are now. We have to do a little bit of setup on our end to get this functioning, because what happens is, as an administrator, you would click invite users, and then you get taken to a table that you can either manually fill out, or you can add a CSV that you've pre-filled out with all the information you need. Now, what happens is when you send the invitations, the user receives an email to say, hey, you've been invited to join this zone and register for this site. When they click that, they're taken to the registration area and they finish their registration. And when they're done registering, they end up in the site and they can access whatever they need to access. So from our end, in terms of what we need, we have to look at what that email needs to look like. So there's a little bit of formatting, we have to do some branding on it. So it's not just an instant, we press the button and you've got invitations. There's a little bit of design back and forthness to go with that. But it is something that's quite handy if you've got, say, cohorts that you're running annually of new people that are coming through and you just need to get them in. This is a great way to do it. It's a nice way to handle staff inductions if you have a list of brand new people and you just want to really quickly get them into a bulk area. It's a really handy way to do it. Any questions about that? Nero? Oh, I'm doing such a good job. All right. And next we have recommended modules, and this is where we'll hop to PGA. Now, recommended modules are a step towards creating a really personalized learning experience. This is all about when you've got a longer course, for example, and you've got people that you need to focus on specific areas. It's a really handy way to focus them in on those areas without having to verbally write down or literally write down the names of the modules you want them to look at. This is accessed from the tutor panel, so your tutor role. And this is something that we just turn on. There's no design backup on this necessarily. We do have to do a little bit to the pathway maps, but it doesn't take us a horrendously long time. So this is a relatively quick process to turn it on anyway. So you'll access this from the tutor role and you'll click the recommended modules button. And the account that I'm currently in as, we stole Richard's account for the day, hope he doesn't mind. He's got access to an account with his name on it. And he's got a couple of students that he's working with. So to recommend modules for these students, he's got a series of pathways over here. So these are all pathways in the same zone. And let's say he wanted to recommend something from coaching sciences. Sorry, it works pathway for pathway. So once we select the pathway we want, we select recommended modules, and then we'll say for Richard's student, we actually want him to do this coaching and performance mindset as well. So when we've done that, you click apply, and then you'll notice that this little flag appears next to that module for that person. And all that means is when this Richard student account logs in, he'll see a flag on his nav panel next to any of the pathways where he has a recommended module that he needs to do. And he'll be able to really easily find it on the pathway because that flag, it renders throughout the pathway as well. I'll try and go in as that account as well. Miracle. So if we go in as a student account, what he can see are all of the pathways where he's had something recommended. And if we access, say, let's go to this one. You can see on this pathway, this is the module that's been recommended directly to him. So when I say that there's a little bit of design work for us to do here, it is all about figuring out where we want these flags to be placed on the pathways. Some of you have some relatively customized pathways, so we have to do a little bit of rejigging to figure out where that flag's actually going to go. But most of the time, if you've got a really standard linear pathway, it's pretty straightforward. And if you have, for example, pathways where you only have one module, then the work is really easy because that flag will just automatically appear next to the pathway name and you don't have to worry about what it looks like on the pathway itself. Yeah, any questions about that? Sweet. Well, that's pretty much all that I have for this e-training session. I'll take a moment to thank you all very much for the people who are here for traveling in, and for the people who are online, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to listen to me drone on for 27 minutes. Yeah, and if you have any questions or need any help with anything or want to talk any shop, we'll be here. And you can just get in touch with one of your reps if you have anything further you need. Cool.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Anybody got anything now?
Pardon?
Anybody got any questions now?
Yeah, does anyone have any final questions?
Somebody chat maybe?
It's Murray here, Lauren. You knew I'd asked a question.
That's why we like it when you come to these, Murray.
It actually came up yesterday. I was training 3 of our PGA members in actually how to mark modules, because we need to build the capability of people that we have to actually be involved in marking stuff that's submitted because of the increase in number of trainees we've got this year. And certainly Richard and I have discussed it sort of briefly, and maybe you've been involved in this discussion as well, about it relates to when someone submits a module, there's a multi-text question that the student's required to write an answer, and when it comes in, it might be able to say 5 marks, comes in and the answer is given and the marker will go, we have marking schedules for every module. And so the person marking goes, okay, yeah, they got that, but they got that, but they missed those 3 things. So they give them, say, 2 out of 5 and explain why. If that particular user then completes the module and doesn't pass it, we'll feedback it. So in other words, at the end, go back in and redo the questions that you got less than 50% in, say. Yeah. And what happens? They will then go in and rewrite their answer. At the moment, what happens? They simply delete what was the original answer and write a new one. When they submit it back to us, we no longer have any record of what their original answer was compared to what their new answer is. So the question I've got is it possible for the programmers to enable a user to be able to say, we just give the instruction, when you write your answer, your new answer, do it in bold or italics. At the moment, I don't think there's any capability of writing in any other format than what is there. Is it possible to actually have, so that when the marker looks at the module resubmitted, they can actually see what they had, what their original answer was and what their new answer is as a comparative?
Yeah, you want to have the old version with the new version, eh? I
Yeah.
tell you what, that's going to be a way more in-depth question than what I can answer right now. But I will talk to Richard about that, and then we'll probably have a more in-depth meeting with some of the other members of the team, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is that for the others like myself who are in this meeting right now, whether they have found a similar situation in their own environments.
We don't mark, so.
No, you're like
We are mark free.
We do.
We just- so,
You have that problem as
we
well.
have that problem, yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay. How can I write that in a way that makes more sense to me? That's a good question, Murray. 10 points for you.
Yeah, for me it's quite good on a Wednesday.
You're doing good. You had coffee today.
I just had one. And listen, can you post me some of that cake as well?
Oh my gosh. Sure thing.
We'll give them more warning for the next one.
We'll post some.
Arrange for us.
Yeah, post it up. That's a good idea.
Delicious.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Cool. Anyway, I'd like to thank Lauren for doing this. We're looking to do this another 3 times this year, do it once a quarter. So if anybody has any feedback on this session or anything they'd like to be included in a future one, I think it'd be quite cool. I'll also share everybody's contacts here if you like, so you can bounce ideas off each other and see if anybody else has some clever ways of achieving something that we see something the others are doing that you quite like, and just try and create a little bit of a community here, and we'll tap into that as well and be able to share our experience in a bit of an online forum type thing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure thing.
But yeah,
Can you be able to send through a link for the recorded session
Yeah.
today for now?
yeah, I'll get that through as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Sweet. No worries. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lauren. Really, really appreciate it.
All right, Will, see you next time.
Thanks, team.
Just have to cake before.
Yeah.
Don't you look up micro learning?
Thanks, Lucy.
Micro learning.
Yeah. There's heaps of stuff online. I've got some pretty good resources that I've come across. I can put some pretty- Yeah.
Those are quite sizable.
You guys all.
I don't know if I can shrink them about. I don't know if I'll be allowed to.
Well, it's
I want to.
not necessarily to like end up completely hold them backwards. So later, if everything keeps going, that's actually really important. Yeah. Instead of just the one. It'd be different with your site because we didn't know how it would function at all.